Hey guys, and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the top 10 potential Star Wars projects that we could see in the future. Now, for the most part, this is just going to be based off of characters and eras and themes that we already know about. Star Wars is such a huge and expansive universe, so there's really an endless supply of new ideas. So, again, for the most part, we're just going to contain this to things that we already know about in the Star Wars universe. So number 10 on my list is a Disney Plus series based on the idea of the Wills of the Force. Now, this idea resurfaced again recently as Disney CEO Bob Iger just released a book, and in that book he talks about his relationship with Star Wars creator George Lucas. Now, unfortunately, Iger explains in this book that George Lucas felt pretty betrayed when he found out that Disney was running with their vision for the sequel trilogy, which of course includes Kylo Ren and Rey and all of these characters, instead of Lucas's original vision. Now, I personally side with George Lucas on this matter based off of everything that I've heard and everything that I've read, but I don't want to talk too much about that because it is not what this video is about, and frankly, it's quite a divisive topic in the Star Wars community right now. But the reason that I bring this up is because George Lucas's original plan for the sequel trilogy was based on the Wills of the Force. Now, we don't know a whole lot about the Wills of the Force, but we do know that in this trilogy that George had envisioned, it would have taken a deeper dive into the idea of midichlorians, and that the Wills sort of control the Force. I think it would be interesting to have a Disney Plus series about the Wills. That way there's not a whole lot of emphasis on it like there would be if it was a movie trilogy, but at least we would know what Lucas had originally envisioned. We'd have some more lore about the Force and why it's there, and also I think it would start to mend this relationship between Lucas and Disney. Now, this next idea comes from a Twitter follower of mine. His @ is Camera Guy Pablo, so if you're on Twitter, definitely go give him a follow, but his idea was pretty interesting. We were talking about directors that could head future Star Wars films. I mentioned Jordan Peele, and that I absolutely love Jordan Peele, but I couldn't quite see a way that his style would adapt to Star Wars super well. But then he suggested, well, what if Jordan Peele made a Sith horror movie? And I thought that that was super interesting. I don't think it would work as a trilogy or as a Disney Plus series, but as one spin-off movie, I think it could be a really interesting idea. There are many different directions that this could take. I personally think it'd be really cool to see some crazy, deluded Sith who maybe uses the Force to torture his victims and has some ancient Sith dagger and is looking for Sith holocrons or something like that. There's a lot of different things that you can play with here. The Night Sisters were also brought up as a potential idea for what this movie could be about. I'm not sure we ever will get a Star Wars horror movie, but if we did, I would certainly be interested in seeing it. Number 8 on my list would be a Disney Plus series where each episode focuses on a different character in the Star Wars universe that we know but don't know too much about, and it would be called From a Certain Point of View. Some characters I would like to see in this series include Tali Lintra, Maz Kanata, Chira Imwe, Ponda Baba and Dr. Evazan Cornelius, Zamwazel, and even some Jedi Council members as well. Even though we saw some of them in the Clone Wars series, I would certainly like to learn some more about characters like Kit Fisto and Aayla Secura. Number 7 on my list would be a Disney Plus series about the Coruscant underworld during the Clone Wars era. Now, a while back, I believe there was a video game that got scrapped in the very early stages of development that was about this exact same thing. So I'm sure they have some storyboard ideas as well as some plot elements that they could apply to this TV show if it ever became a thing. I really like seeing the Coruscant underworld in the Clone Wars animated show as well as Attack of the Clones, so if it ever did happen, I'd be interested in watching it for sure. Number 6 on my list would be pre-Phantom Menace, centering around a young Sheev Palpatine and his master Darth Plagueis, as well as Count Dooku before he turned to evil and his Padawan, Qui-Gon Jinn. This would take us back further than we ever have been in Star Wars before on screen, and I think a lot of fans would be interested to learn how the Emperor became so sinister and evil, as well as watch the events of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis unfold. And seeing Jedi Knight Count Dooku before he turned to evil is also another aspect of this show that I think a lot of fans would find super intriguing. Number 5 on my list I think could work as a single spin-off film or a Disney Plus series, but I would be super interested to learn if Darth Vader had an apprentice. Now, if you've played the Force Unleashed games, you will know that Darth Vader actually did have an apprentice named Starkiller. Now, unfortunately, those games are no longer canon, but that doesn't mean that Darth Vader couldn't have had an apprentice at some point between episodes 3 and 4. It could even be the same character if Disney wanted to make Starkiller canon once more. But I think either way, fans would be super interested to learn if Darth Vader had an apprentice, and possibly hoped that that apprentice would help him overthrow Emperor Palpatine. Number 4. Mace Windu survives Order 66. Now, this is something that I think would work best as a singular spin-off film, but if it were announced that Samuel L. Jackson was returning to reprise his role as the beloved character, I think Star Wars fans would be absolutely bursting with joy to hear that Mace Windu survived his fall from Revenge of the Sith. Samuel L. Jackson has actually stated multiple times that he would absolutely love to return as the character. He said as much at Star Wars Celebration, as well as to Stephen Colbert on his show. Now, I personally would love to see Mace Windu return and see how he survived that fall and avoided the clone troopers and the Jedi Purge and sort of what he did to gather himself afterwards. And to all these fans that might say, oh, well, he couldn't have survived that fall. I mean, Darth Maul got sliced in half and fell down a bottomless pit. Mace Windu is one of the, if not the most powerful character in Star Wars. I would probably say Anakin/Vader over him, but he's extremely powerful, so I don't think it's ridiculous to say that he could have survived that fall. And just thinking about a potential Mace Windu versus Darth Vader duel in that film gives me chills running up and down my spine. That would absolutely make the movie. It would be insane. Number 3 on my list would be continuing the story from the Solo spin-off movie as a Disney Plus series. Now, apparently when Alden Ehrenreich first signed on for the role as Han Solo, he signed a deal for 3 movies. Now, unfortunately, Solo bombed at the box office, and because of this, I don't think Disney is planning on doing any more spin-off films, or at least for the time of being. I think they're primarily focused on Disney Plus. But in the year since its release, Solo has risen to somewhat of a cult status, and many Star Wars fans are petitioning for a second Solo spin-off film to be made. And I can totally understand why they want to see a second film. I mean, I do too. It was really fun, I enjoyed it a lot, and it ended seemingly with more story to tell. It felt to me like we were just beginning to kick off a new adventure, and like we were going to see much more of Han and Chewie together. Also, with the return of Darth Maul, with Han's ex-girlfriend Kira working with him in the gang Crimson Dawn, and the introduction of a new character, Infus Nest, who was a rebel leader for her people, I felt like there was still much story left to tell. But unfortunately, I don't think Disney's going to do any more spin-off movies, or at least for the time of being, and even if they do, I'm not sure they will revisit Solo just due to its box office performance. So because of that, I would love to see Solo continued on Disney Plus as a new series. Number 2 on my list would be an animated series created by Clone Wars creator Dave Filoni, showing the adventures of Luke, Han, Leia, Lando, and Chewie after the events of Return of the Jedi. After the EU was banned from canon once Disney took over Star Wars, many fans were very upset that the stories that they grew up reading and loving were no longer part of canon. Now that they're not, there is a huge gap between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, so there are a lot of stories that we can fit in that time period, and how better to do it than with the characters that we all love: Luke, Han, Leia, Lando, and Chewie. I think adapting things from the EU in ways that it would make sense with canon would be a great way to get people to watch this show, including introducing characters like Mara Jade, as well as taking the stories from the Thrawn trilogy and incorporating them in this animated series. And number 1 on my list is a Knights of the Old Republic trilogy based on the story of Darth Revan, created by Game of Thrones creators David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. Now, we know that they're getting their own trilogy, and we know that we're getting something related to the Knights of the Old Republic at some point, but we don't know whether that's a single movie, a trilogy, or a Disney Plus series, and we also don't know if that'll be about Darth Revan at all. Now, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss created the Game of Thrones television show, and regardless of your feelings towards the last season, it was an absolutely incredible show, and its production level was just absolutely insane. So I think that Knights of the Old Republic is right up their alley, and I think the story of Darth Revan is incredibly compelling. So aside from the conclusion of the Skywalker saga, there is no story I think I would rather see than the tale of Darth Revan portrayed over 3 films, headed by the creators of Game of Thrones. But that's about it for today, guys. If you liked the video, feel free to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.